Hi, we're going to take a walk through all the features of Prism Pro and kind of demo each of the features and help you understand what they're capable of and how you might explain them to a customer. So the first thing we're going to look at is custom dashboards. So within Prism Central, when you install, since 4.7 or so when dashboards came out, you're going to get, if you don't license Prism Pro, you're going to get, 8 or so widgets here, and they're locked, right? You can't change those widgets. When you unlock custom dashboards, what it does is it unlocks all the widgets, and then it allows you the ability that you can move the widgets around, so you can arrange them, in a manner that makes sense to you. You can add widgets, you can remove them. You can also have multiple dashboards. So, some good ideas for that is you might create a dashboard like for a certain application. So you might look at a certain cluster that application runs on, or you could create widgets for the different VMs in that application, and then tie them to a metric, from the analytics page, and that way you could get a dashboard view, of a single application, or you may have a dashboard for the data center versus one for Robo. So there's a lot of different reasons. If you add the widget, there's quite a few things you can do in here today, but there's a lot more to come. So there's some fixed widgets here, and then the ones at the top are the custom ones for alerts. You can put in ones for the top list, but the custom chart widget is where you can pick the entity type, so host or virtual machine cluster, and then go on to pick your metric, and then they'll add your widget to the dashboard, and if you kind of build that out for all the different VMs or clusters that you want within that. Next, we'll take a look at the capacity planning feature. So within the planning tab here, really there's two pieces of capacity planning. There's a capacity runway, which came first, but this view has changed. So we get a high-level summary in the table here of all the different clusters, and then their runway metrics here shown in dates. And if you click on any one of these, then that's going to take you to the chart-based view. So you got the 3 buckets for storage runway, CPU runway, and memory runway. They each get a day's value. And then you get to use, for storage, you can see it by usage. So down below it shows you the different categories of what's consuming the storage. Or you can look at it on a per container basis. And then I'll show you all the containers, which just in a summary of what they're using. But if you drop the list down and pick one of the containers, then it just shows you the usage for that individual container. And likewise on memory, you see the same thing, but if I pick a certain node or cluster out of here, then I'm going to see what's running on it and how much memory they use. And then the view recommendations button here, that's for the oversizing and finding waste within your cluster. So the first recommendation is finding dead VMs. This is simply just VMs that have been powered off for over 30 days. So it gives you the list, and somebody could take it and figure out if they could delete these or if they need to hang on to them for some reason. And then if you scroll down, the second recommendation is for over-provisioned VMs. So this is VMs that are using just a fraction of their CPU and memory that's been provisioned to them. And typically once customers give the memory, it's always kind of a fight to get it back from the application owners. But this empowers them to at least identify the VMs and then try to go have that hard discussion with them. If we back out of this, then we can look at the scenarios. So the scenarios is the what-if planning that's been talked about a lot. That if I want to add a workload to a cluster, or you can even size a new cluster, so kind of what Sizer does, I can do this. So I've pre-built one because you can save them. And what this is it's got the existing workload at the top. And then on April 1st, so a couple of weeks from now, I've chose to add a database workload to this cluster. And I'm going to do it on April 1st. So it's telling me how much I'm using here and the number of VMs that I'm adding. And the second one is a VDI. So about a month later, I'm going to add a VDI workload to this, which will be 150 virtual desktops of the knowledge worker. So I've now chose to add 2 different workloads. I'm going to keep my runway target at 6 months. So I can no longer have 6 months. So adding those workloads has shortened my runway down to 23 days. So I need to figure out what resources I want to add. And I can do that two ways. I can add the resources manually, but if I click the recommendation button, it's going to come back and it's going to give me a node recommendation. And it's going to do it, since I'm adding 2 workloads on different days, it's going to give me 2 recommendations. So the first, it tells me about a week before I'm adding it, I should add 2 nodes, and it gives me the configuration that I should add them on. And then again, it's telling me later here to add 2 more nodes about a week before the second workload add. So if they were closer, it might make just 1 recommendation, or if they were further apart. But it's nice because it tells you when you should add the nodes and what configuration that they should be. And if you click the Generate PDF, what it's going to do is it's going to print you out a nice PDF that gives you more detail. So it's going to show you the the consumption graphs and the config about your current cluster, the workload you're adding, and what the charts will look like after you add it. So you can work up one of these and print it out, but it's a nice to be able to hand to the customer, or the customer can hand to management for that. And then you also have the option, I've modeled this workload. If I wanted to take the nodes away, I could just be simply saying, okay, I don't want to buy extra nodes, but it doesn't work on this cluster. Maybe they have a lot of clusters in the environment, so I can take these modeled workloads and I can choose a different cluster, within the Prism Central, and see what that does to my runway. So I've picked a different one, and we can see I'd have plenty of storage capacity and CPU on this cluster, but not enough memory. So maybe they could just memory upgrade that. So the nice thing is, you can add the workload and choose to add nodes, or you could try to find a place within a cluster on where you could place that, or you could choose to build a new cluster where it's going to take those 2 new workloads and then give me a recommendation and build a totally new cluster out of it. So you've got a lot of different ways to find a landing spot for that new workload. And I'll back out of here and not save it. And the last thing on capacity planning is if you go to alerts and we look at the alert policy, there are capacity planning alerts now. It'll be under runway. Yeah, under runway. And so you can see there's a number of runway alerts here. So you could allow them to customize the runway to the number of days that they'd want to get. So it's critical when I'm 60 days of runway left versus 90 for warning. They can adjust these, and you have the exception that if they want different runways for different clusters, then they can create exception rules. And you can do this for the CPU, memory, and storage. There's alerts for all these. And that's the last piece of the capacity planning. So we'll take a look at the search feature now. And the search feature is just a quick way to find data points on your clusters without having to click through. Prism's pretty easy to find information, but sometimes you just want to find something, click, and it's an easy way to do it, and it's a different way to kind of find the information. So let's say I wanted to find VMs with IOPS that are greater than 1,000. So if I put that in there, it should return a search and give me a list of VMs over here that have more than 1,000 IOPS. So then there's a couple things I can do with that. If I click the name of one of the VMs, it's going to take me over to the detail view for that VM. So I get to see all the charts, I get to see the config, and the tabs here that you expect when you manage a VM within Prism Central. And if I click X to back up, the other thing is it's tied into the entity browser or Explorer, that if I click the Explorer button down at the bottom, it's going to take me to the Explorer page, and it's going to show me the results of my search query. So here I only have one VM, but I can see the VM, and it now shows me the the details in here. So if I had a list where there was maybe 10 or 20 or 50, then I could mass choose them and take action. So if I wanted to power them off, clone them. So it's just a different way. Like maybe you wanted to find VMs with a 4 CPU, and you wanted to change their config, or you wanted to find VMs all from a certain application. I could all find them, select them, and then power them off or restart them or whatever. So there's a number of actions that you could take that would lead the search to be pretty valuable for you.